a former American heavyweight boxer by the name of Zora Folley.
Zora Folley, the challenger.
He was boxing's perfect gentleman, disciplined, respected, and trusted enough to fight Muhammad Ali for the heavyweight crown.
All I can say is that he's the #1 man in the whole world, and I can't do no more than to fight the top contenders. He's been around.
But just months after turning 41, Zora Folley was found dead in a motel pool, under circumstances that still don't add up. Is the truth being hidden from us? The official cause was deemed an accident. But the real story is a mess of missing reports, witnesses changing their stories, and injuries that can't be explained. Over 50 years later, one haunting question remains. Was Zora Folley's death just a tragic mishap? Or was it something much darker? To find the truth, we have to go back to where it all began. Zora Folley's journey to the top started far from the bright lights of the ring. He was born in Dallas in 1931, but it was Chandler, Arizona, where his family moved when he was still a boy, that shaped who he became. Even as a kid, Folley stood out, not because he was loud or flashy, but because he wasn't. He was calm, focused, steady. It was his quiet confidence and work ethic that really set him apart. There were no wild stories or dramatic outbursts, just a young man raised on the basics: keep your head down, respect others, and do the work. But boxing didn't enter Folley's life until he was a teenager. At just 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, lying about his age to get in early. It turned out to be the move that set everything in motion. The Army was where Folley's natural talent for fighting was revealed. He tore through the military boxing ranks, collecting titles and building a reputation for being as tough as he was respectful. He earned 5 battle stars during the Korean War, picking up not just medals but a level of discipline and toughness that would carry him into the next phase of his life. It's one thing to show raw talent, but Folley also displayed an impeccable attitude, always courteous, composed, and in control. Even here, in the rough-and-tumble environment of Army gyms, he earned a nickname, the Gentleman Boxer. By the time he turned pro in 1953, Folley hit the ground running. 17 straight wins to start his career. No hype needed. He had a sharp jab, a powerful right hand, and a knack for reading what the other guy was going to do before he did it. Folley kept things simple. He wasn't brash, but he was smart, and he made every punch count. And he wasn't the type to showboat or stir up drama either. Instead, his results spoke for themselves, and by the mid-1950s, everyone noticed. Of course, boxing is never just about what happens in the ring. In 1958, Folley found himself at the center of one of the most hotly debated decisions in boxing history when he fought Britain's golden boy, Henry Cooper. To call it a close contest might be an understatement. For 10 grueling rounds, Folley outboxed Cooper. Calm, composed, landing the cleaner shots. Ringside observers expected his hand to be raised in victory, but the judges shocked the boxing world, declaring Cooper the winner via split decision. Fans and analysts immediately cried foul, pointing to hometown bias. Folley had been robbed. It was a bitter pill for him to swallow, but he didn't lash out or fan the flames of controversy. True to his reputation, he accepted the result with grace and quiet dignity. That was Zora Folley. Always measured, even when he had every reason not to be. And he kept climbing. Year after year, Folley was a fixture in the heavyweight top 10, even reaching the #1 spot in 1959. He wasn't a knockout artist, but he was always a threat, and nobody wanted to take him lightly. He outpointed top contenders like Eddie Mackin, Doug Jones, and Nino Valdez, names that derailed other careers but couldn't stop his momentum. But for all his skill and consistency, his career always seemed to be missing one thing: a shot at the world title. Zora Folley's greatest asset, his discipline, was also his biggest liability. He had the kind of record that demanded attention: 79 wins, 44 by knockout, and only 11 losses in 96 fights. Even so, the world title kept slipping through his fingers. Because he didn't talk trash. He didn't sell drama, he didn't make headlines. And in the 50s and 60s, that meant promoters overlooked you, especially if you were a black man who refused to play into the caricatures the industry wanted to market. The business side of boxing cared about ticket sales, not just skill. And Folley didn't fit the mold. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a showman. He was just a great fighter. And that wasn't enough. And look at the timing. Folley's peak years overlapped with an era of dominant champions. Floyd Patterson held the title for much of the late 1950s and early 60s, followed by Sonny Liston's brief but intimidating reign. Patterson's camp, notably his manager Cus D'Amato, was known for carefully selecting opponents. Fighters considered too dangerous or not flashy enough, like Folley, sometimes struggled to secure opportunities. And by the time the chance finally came, the clock was already ticking. On March 22, 1967, he stepped into the ring at Madison Square Garden to face Muhammad Ali, the biggest name in boxing, and the man wearing the heavyweight crown. But this wasn't Folley at the peak of his powers. At 34 years old, he was entering the final stretch of his career, while Ali, on the other hand, was 25 and in his prime. Fast, explosive, and full of confidence. The fight was more than just a title defense. It was Ali's last bout before his forced exile from boxing for refusing the Vietnam draft. The air that night was thick with history. Leading up to it, Ali, normally a master of psychological warfare, held back his usual taunts. Instead, he praised Folley, calling him such a nice, sweet old man, and admitting it was hard to get angry at him. That kind of respect from Ali was rare. In the ring, Folley landed some clean shots, moved with purpose, and made Ali work for every opening.
He's looking for the spot.
But time had caught up with him. By the 7th round, Ali's combination of speed and timing proved too much.
I don't know if he's gonna make this one.
A knockout ended the fight, and with it, Folley's long pursuit of the heavyweight title. Even in defeat, he earned Ali's admiration. Slick, tricky, and a good boxer, he said afterward. It was bittersweet validation, but it also added to Folley's legend. He may not have walked out with the belt, but he left lasting impressions, even on one of the greatest fighters to ever put on gloves. Still, his career didn't reach the full heights it could have.
Of the 7th round, Folley tried game.
Because as the cheers faded and the spotlight shifted, Folley's story took a turn that no one saw coming. July 7th, 1972, Zora Folley checked into the Wilmot Manor Motel in Tucson, Arizona. But something about the reservation stood out. He used an alias, a detail that already raises eyebrows. It should have been an ordinary night for the 41-year-old retired fighter. But within hours, Folley would be dead. And what happened that night has haunted boxing ever since. By this point, Folley had been out of the ring for 2 years. And like so many fighters after the final bell, retirement hadn't come easy. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a champion with big endorsements or a long-term plan. He was a man still working to support his family. He ran some local businesses. He stayed active in his hometown, coaching kids, serving the community, showing up when others wouldn't. But the spotlight had moved on, and the paydays were gone. Still, no one could have predicted that a simple trip to Tucson would be the end. The official story surrounding his death came quickly. It went like this. Folley was at the motel with acquaintances, described as friends in some reports. Sometime after midnight, things got physical, what authorities called roughhousing. The events were framed as a tragic accident stemming from simple horseplay. On the surface, maybe that helps everything make sense, but it didn't take long for cracks to show. Almost immediately, things didn't add up. The motel clerk was one of the first people to see Folley after the incident. And what was described didn't sound like the aftermath of a simple fall. The clerk noted that Folley's head had multiple injuries, 3 to be exact, a large bump on his forehead, another wound on the back of his head, and most disturbingly, a hole on the top of his skull. The word crushed came up. These weren't poolside scrapes, this was blunt force trauma. How does one accidental fall cause all that? The more you think about it, the harder it is to buy the story. And it's not just the injuries themselves that push back against the theory. The autopsy report and the police report, two documents that should have been central to understanding what happened, both vanished. Not misfiled, not delayed, just gone without a trace. These aren't trivial papers. These were the kinds of records that could have told the real story: injury patterns, timelines, witness statements, the kind of evidence that lets facts cut through speculation. Without them, the official story hangs in the air, untested and unproven, while suspicion grows in every direction. And the deeper you look into it, the less it makes sense. Then there's the question of who else was there that night. Eyewitness accounts didn't clarify anything. In fact, they only muddied the waters further. Dorothy Broom, a key witness, gave a statement right after Foley's death that lined up with the official story. They were roughhousing, and Folley fell. But decades later, when asked about the night by reporter Marshall Terrell, she had a completely new story. How does one person remember two totally different versions of the same tragedy? The inconsistency doesn't just cast doubt on her memory, it makes the whole accident theory feel shaky. And it's not just her. No one at the scene has ever told the same story twice. All of these gaps and contradictions open the floodgates for theories. Friends and family never accepted that Foley's death was a simple accident. To them, there was no way he simply slipped and died. And they weren't alone. The missing reports only fuel suspicions, making it feel like there was something or someone keeping the truth out of reach. Every time someone tries to close the book, another question pops up. Why was Folley using a fake name? Who was really with him that night? And what happened in those final minutes by the pool? This is the kind of story that refuses to fade quietly into history. And why would it? It's a trail of contradictions, dead ends, and loose threads that pull the story in different directions. Just enough to keep the mystery alive, but never enough to tie it up. Whatever happened at that motel stayed unresolved. But decades later, one man couldn't let it go. And his investigation would uncover new details that challenged everything we thought we knew about the death of Zora Folley. Marshall Terrell, a local Arizona reporter, couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unsaid. What started as a curiosity turned into a mission to uncover the truth. And for Terrell, it wasn't just about writing a biography, it was personal. He spoke to Folley's son, Robert, who told him bluntly, "One day, the truth will come out." That statement lit a fire under Terrell, pushing him through years of interviews, document searches, and late-night phone calls. Eventually, that investigation became a book, Zora Folley, The Distinguished Life and Mysterious Death of a Gentleman Boxer. And what he uncovered was more disturbing than anyone expected. Terrell's digging brought out details that the original police reports never mentioned. First, he confirmed what many had suspected. Folley didn't check into the Wilmot Manor motel under his real name. And he wasn't alone that night. According to Terrell, he was accompanied by two key people, a longtime mistress, and someone described only as a shady celebrity hanger-on. That detail changed everything. Why would a man like Folley, disciplined, respected, known for integrity, hide his identity that night? And what kind of company was he keeping? And then there was the drinking. Folley had reportedly been intoxicated that night, a detail that never made it into the original story. With these facts in hand, Terrell pieced together a new scenario. According to his theory, sometime after the pool had closed, Folley dove in, possibly to show off, possibly just careless. What he didn't see was the low concrete divider separating the adult and kiddie sections of the pool. He struck it head first. That, Terrell believed, explained the head trauma, the bump on the forehead, the crushed back of the skull, and the hole on top. More than the original roughhousing story ever could. But if this was what really happened, why didn't the authorities say so? Why did they stick to a vague tale about friendly horseplay? And why did the police seem so quick to close the case? And why, decades later, are the two most critical documents in the case, the police report and the autopsy file, still missing? Terrell searched everywhere in 2014. Nothing. No copies, no records, no explanations. It's hard not to ask the obvious question. Did someone want the truth buried? Eyewitness testimony didn't help much either. Remember when I mentioned one of the key witnesses, Dorothy Broom, and how she gave a statement that matched the official story? Yeah, well, she only made things more confusing. Back in 1972, she had given an account to police, claiming Folley fell backward, hit his head, and slid into the water. It lined up with the official version, conveniently. But when Terrell interviewed her, she told a completely different story. This time, she claimed Folley dove into the pool, hitting his head on the concrete divider. That's not a small detail, that's an entirely different event. This inconsistency wasn't just a small hole in the narrative. It's the kind of contradiction that makes you question everything else about the case. If the main eyewitness can't keep her story straight, how much faith can you put in any version of events? Of course, not everyone bought either accident theory. I think something much more violent was going on, and I'm sure you do too. As one writer put it bluntly, the episode stinks of foul play. And then there's that detail no one can shake. A shady celebrity hanger-on, whose presence points to something more sinister. Who was this person? And why was a man like Folley spending his final night with people he normally would have avoided? The idea that Zora Folley, a disciplined, respected family man, would end up dead in such suspicious circumstances just doesn't sit right for a lot of people. And while Marshal Terrell's investigation may have unearthed new details, it didn't close the case. If anything, it only deepened the mystery. His cleaner version of events, a drunken dive gone wrong, felt plausible, but still incomplete. Witnesses contradicted themselves, crucial evidence was missing, and the physical injuries begged uncomfortable questions. Was this really just a tragic accident? Or did someone want Zora Folley out of the picture? No one has ever been able to say for sure. Even now, more than 50 years later, his death feels unresolved, not forgotten, not settled, just suspended in doubt. It's not just the mystery, it's the sense that something was buried with him. Whatever happened that night at the Tucson motel, it cut Folley's life short and permanently altered his story. That's the problem with a case like this. The more you dig, the more you realize how much you'll never know. Folley's death remains an open wound, but one thing's certain, the truth hasn't come out, not completely. And that gap between what we know and what we don't has kept this mystery alive, entwined with the legacy of one of boxing's most respected figures. If anything, it only adds to the sense that Zora Folley's story, just like his career, feels unfinished. For all the questions that linger, what's never in doubt is how much he accomplished and how much more he had to give. He was the rare heavyweight who could dominate a fight with his mind as much as his fists. With a professional record of 79 wins, 11 losses, and 6 draws, he built a career on skill, patience, and a deep understanding of boxing. His style was all about timing, angles, and making the other guy miss. You didn't see wild brawls or reckless swings. You saw a man who broke down opponents piece by piece, round after round. And his greatness wasn't measured only in punches. Folley carried himself with grace in a sport that often celebrated the loudest voices and the biggest egos. Even Muhammad Ali, who made a career out of getting into opponents' heads, drew the line with him. It wasn't often that Ali skipped the usual taunts. And when he called Folley a humble, respectable man, you could tell he meant it. But his impact wasn't limited to boxing. After retirement, he didn't fade into obscurity like so many fighters often do. He stayed rooted in Chandler, Arizona, the city that helped raise him, and that he helped raise in return. From serving on the Chandler City Council to mentoring local youth, he was the kind of guy who'd show up at community events, shake hands, and ask how folks were doing. Chandler recognized what he meant to the city. Today, you'll find Zora Folley Park, the Zora Folley Aquatic Center, and Zora Folley Street, all named in his honor. The Chandler Museum even put together an exhibit to mark his fight with Ali, making sure new generations know who he was. And that's what makes his death at 41 so hard to accept. Folley wasn't just a fighter. He was a father to 9 kids, a husband, a mentor, a man whose best years might still have been ahead, a man who deserved more. The circumstances of his death only deepen that sense of loss. For many, it's impossible to separate his legacy from the sense that something was left unresolved. His story became a reminder that even the strongest among us can be gone in an instant, leaving behind unfinished business and unanswered questions. It's easy to accept the official line that it was an accident. But for those who knew him and those who've studied the case, that explanation doesn't hold up. His death hangs like a question mark over his life, ensuring that every mention of his name comes with an air of mystery. Still, Folley's life stands for more than the questions about his death. He showed that you could compete at the highest level without sacrificing your principles. He proved that dignity, discipline, and respect matter, even in a sport built on violence. And in Chandler, his spirit still lingers. In the park where kids play, in the pool that bears his name, and in the stories told by those who watched him fight or worked alongside him in the community. Zora Folley was a man who mastered the ring with grace, a man who mastered a brutal sport with the heart of a gentleman. But the final chapter of his life was anything but graceful. And although we may never get the answers, one thing is certain. Zora Folley's story has a permanence, a weight that keeps it alive long after his final bell. So now we want to hear from you. What do you think? Was it just a tragic accident? Or was something darker at play that night in Tucson? Drop your theory in the comments below. We'll be reading every single one. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so we can keep making content like this for you in the future. See you in the next one.